Mind if I give you one of these to check out when you have some time?
Oh, sure.
Just a DVD to watch it. Must be between classes.
Yeah.
What are you studying?
Biological science.
Biological science.
To be like a biologist for like DNR and stuff like that.
So you want to, it's more like wildlife biology then?
Yep.
That's cool. I'm Todd.
Payton.
Payton? Where do you live, Payton?
Garner.
How far is that?
It's about 30 minutes.
It's not too bad of a drive then.
Terrible, no.
Better than an hour and a half commute or having to stay on campus.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to go into biology? Wildlife biology.
I've been a hunter my whole life, grew up around it, so I just figured I'd do something that I enjoy doing anyway.
So when's your next class?
1:30.
1:30? Well, I won't bug you for too long. Mind if I ask you a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
I know I'm a complete strange old guy. I do this. I'm a Christian evangelist, so I go around and I go to campuses and other places, and I hand these out. I'm part of a project called the Biggest Question Project, and the DVD asks the biggest question in life. So what do you think happens when you die, and why are you here? What was your name again?
Payton.
Payton.
I really have no idea. I don't really think about it as much. Don't try to think about it that much.
No, I don't blame you. How old are you?
19.
19. Yeah, when I was 19, I didn't think about it much either. I probably should have, because at 19, I was getting ready to jump out of airplanes for a living in the Army. So, so were you raised with any kind of church background, or?
Not. I mean, yes and no. I'm not big into it, but
Yep.
I'm a part of it and all that. Just
So,
not big into
what kind
it.
of background do you have?
Just Lutheran. Stuff
Lutheran?
Like that. Yep.
So would you acknowledge that there is a God?
Yes.
Just kind of don't really know what you think about him, or?
I know that there is a God, and like he's the person that like, created everything, and I
And-
know I would like to believe that there's something waiting for us when we die.
And Peyton, don't feel like, if you don't want to talk anymore, just say, hey dude, I don't want to talk anymore. I totally get it. So I know how strange it is. So and I do record, but mostly for my own protection, to be honest with you, because sometimes people get angry. I've had people threaten to call the cops, and I've even had people threaten to attack me. So I don't want you to feel like, and if you want to go, that's fine. But so you know there's God, don't really know for sure where you're at with God as far as what you think and how things go. So well, I hate to bring up a tragic event, but you know, you think back to Sunday night in Las Vegas. I mean, 60 people counting the gunman. Well, he probably knew he was going to die that night, but 59 people, not counting the gunman, and over 500 people are wounded. And put yourself in that scenario. You know, you could have, not that you necessarily could have been there, but that could be you. You know, anytime, literally, yeah, exactly. You know, you could be on your way home today, and some idiot driving around texting, and I hate to use that terminology, but could cross the center line. You could be doing nothing wrong, and you could meet the end of your life, and you would be standing in front of God, and He would say, Peyton, why should I let you into heaven? And what would your response be?
That I've always tried to do like the right thing by people and like not to mistreat anyone.
Okay, so be basically a decent and upright person. So it's a standard of morality, is what you would say. So we get our morality. How does God judge morality? How does God judge whether or not you're a good person or decent and
I think
right?
by our actions, and if say we do mess up, if we're actually sincere, like if we try to make up for it or not.
Okay, so that'd be between, so like you and I, like you walk into me accidentally, not really paying attention, but you didn't do it on purpose, and you're like, and I spill my coffee or whatever it is, and you would be like, dude, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean that. So do you know what God uses for a standard for how we know we've sinned against Him or violated His laws?
I have no idea.
You grew up Lutheran.
I know, but
you probably paid about as much attention as I did, to be honest with you. I grew up in the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, and I did not pay any attention growing up. So I didn't come to any kind of real faith, until I was a lot older than you are now. You've heard the Ten Commandments, obviously. So the Ten Commandments start off with like the first 4 are all about how we relate to God, and the last 6, for the most part, are about how we relate to fellow man. So if you look at the last 6, you've heard, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not. My brain's freezing up on me now. But we've got, thou shalt not lie.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the first four, which are basically summed up in the New Testament when Christ says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. I'm paraphrasing. But basically every fiber of your being, you're supposed to love God with every fiber of your being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we relate to God. And so God is infinite. Would you agree that God has neither beginning nor end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So God's law, we call that his law, his eternal moral law. His law is forever. It didn't start at a certain point in time, and it doesn't end. His law has always existed, even though there hasn't always been mankind.
Mm-hmm.
Because God's law is part of who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So God tells us to not lie, not just because it's bad for us to lie to one another. And I'm not talking like you're talking to your girlfriend and she's like, did these pants make me look fat? And you're like, no babe, no, those pants don't, Now granted, you shouldn't be telling her if they do, but there's a tactful way of saying, you might want to try on a different pair without
Mm-hmm.
saying, no babe, you look really bad in those.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not talking about how we relate in a positive and polite way with people. I'm talking about you back into somebody's car in your driveway and you leave and they're like, dude, did you back into my car? And you don't want to have a fight with them, so you're like, I don't know who did it.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a little bit, that's a little different. But it's not just because we're not supposed to lie to one another. It's because God himself doesn't lie. So when God says something, just by the nature of the fact that God is who he is, we don't lie. Because he can't lie. He cannot lie. And then the biggest is to love him above everything else and not have any other gods above him.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you and I, Todd and Payton, do on not loving other things more than God?
Mm.
You hunt, right?
Yeah. I feel like we forget about it, that he's actually like a part of everything. So in the way, the things that we love, we're still really loving him too.
I would agree that God is everywhere. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's necessarily part of this, whatever this is made out of. And he's definitely made all the animals. Mm-hmm. So when you're out hunting, you can see God's creation, right? Mm-hmm. Like hunters more than anybody oftentimes are far more in tune with God's creation because they're out enjoying a day like this. I'm sure you've probably been thinking today, I'd love to be out in a stand somewhere. Mm-hmm. You a bow hunter?
Yep.
Yeah, so today'd be an awesome day. Go down range, wind's not going to give you away. So while I agree that we can see reality, Romans 1 says that in reality, creation tells us there's a God. The tree tells us there's a God. Deer, the existence of a deer will tell us that there's a God because there's no way that deer happened by accident. Mm-hmm. Something had to make that deer. But oftentimes we'll love other things more. So like when we know we're supposed to be doing something to honor God, we'll choose to do something else. And I do it all the time. I oftentimes will put my comfort in my career or other things in front of God, and I'll come up with excuses why I can't go do what somebody said, hey, let's get together for a Bible study, let's get together for prayer, let's get together and go minister to somebody who's shut in their house, and I'll come up with excuses. And so I'm not only am I neglecting that person, I'm neglecting God. And he holds us accountable for that. Do you know what he did though? Because we're going to be guilty, right? If we're held to God's standards, the 10 Commandments, we're going to be guilty.
Everyone's going to be guilty.
Right. You and I specifically, if we were walking out of here today and a plane crashed on us, I don't know why I picked a plane, but it's completely random, something that shouldn't happen here. Mm-hmm. The plane crashed on us and we died. God's going to look at both of us and he's going to say, you're guilty. And maybe you've never actually murdered somebody, but you've hated people. Mm-hmm. You haven't always loved me the way you're supposed to. Mm-hmm. Why should I let you in? And we're both naturally we're going to say, well, I'm a pretty decent person. I mean, I'd be like, hey, look at me. I go out and I talk about you with people. Mm-hmm. But he's going to be like, that's not what I did. That's not how you get right with me. Do you know what he did? And that's the key. How do we get right with God?
I gotta go.
Well, that's fine. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, you have a good day.